Hey, Kimba.
Good evening, Brother Dennis. Good evening, everyone.
We'll get started in a couple minutes. Is he? How funny. Hey, y'all, we'll give it about 2 or 3 more minutes and we'll get started. Hey, Kaylee.
Hey.
Good evening. Good evening. I got 2 people who I saw just pull up, and as soon as they come in, we'll get started here. Ooh, that's hot. Hello. Clock right. It is. Look at that. Say what? The parking. It's a little harder to find a parking place right now than it has been. Yes, with his long truck. Yeah. Yeah, so they're moving all the food distribution stuff. They're having people back inside, and it's in that building. And so they're trying to keep the front open for like, no, they're still doing cars. So they come in here and do like a little devotional kind of thing. And then they come kind of like we used to do before COVID started. And so they're trying to keep that front parking lot open for people who are handicapped or have trouble moving around a little bit. So I'm not allowed to park there either. Not that I don't normally park there actually, but I squeezed in here earlier in the day before it was full. So, but it was Tuesday. Yesterday was our first time to do it in there, and it was pretty good. It was pretty good, except for like the 2 or 3 cars that just parked right in the middle of the street and got out and came inside. And so then there was just traffic all over the place. It was a mess. It was a mess. All right. Well, you can fill Jerry in on what he misses. I'm sure he's going to miss a lot. Good evening. I missed y'all. It's been a couple weeks. Hello. We had spring break, which for me is like the opposite of break. It's like 12 hours every day kind of week. And then last week was kind of nuts too. I was out of town, and then anyways, I've been playing catch up, and I'm still playing catch up. So we'll see how class goes today. I apologize that I'm playing catch up, but we're gonna try to finish out Leviticus today, which will leave us with what, 10, 11, 12, 13, 5 more weeks, 4 or 5 more weeks to get through Numbers and Deuteronomy. So we'll scoot through it. Now that we've done Exodus, it's a little easier to move more quickly through everyone. I have started grading the writing assignments. I'm not finished yet. So if you don't have yours yet, my goal is to have it to you by class time this coming week, probably beginning of the week, like Monday-ish, something like that. And that way you can look at it and see the feedback and get cranking on your next one. But I've read through most of them, and I've been enjoying them a lot. It's very cool seeing how the different ways that everybody approaches scripture and the things that you glean from it. I think it's always so interesting to have a room full of people thinking about a particular text, as opposed to just continuing to think about a text in the same way that I always have, that applies to my experiences and my places and my times. It's so good to hear how what a particular text means to someone else and where you are. So I'm enjoying them very, very much. And I'll give some good, I'll try to give some good feedback on everybody's. So and then once I give you feedback, if you have questions about what I write on there, just give me a holler, and I can answer anything, or try to answer anything. So cool. Well, why don't we, oh, looky there. Risha's joining us. We'll wait for, hey Risha. Oh, think she's connecting still. There we are. Hey, Risha. Welcome.
Hello.
Good
Hello,
to see
everyone.
you. All right, let's pray, and we'll get back into Leviticus here. We need to pray to make it through Leviticus, I think. God, we're so thankful for you today. We are thankful for Scripture, even Leviticus, because it does have so much to teach us. Pray that you help us as we dig through it today and think and talk about things that are so far removed from our culture and even our faith a little bit. I pray that you would be with us as we discuss different things and as we draw a little bit closer to your heart. Help us to see your heart today. Help us to not just see a bunch of rules and laws and commandments and punishments and blessings and such, but help us to see your heart. We want to draw near to your heart, and we want to be a people whose hearts mimic yours and beat with yours. And I pray that you be with all of us in the different ways that we've that just life is a struggle right now. Know that all of us have stuff going on. I have people that we care about who are struggling with things, and I just pray that you'd be in all of those situations, and that you'd be with us this evening. In the name of Jesus, we lift up your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, let me write down who is here. You're here, you're here. You're here, you're here, you're here, you're here. Cool. All right, so we left off in Leviticus 17. We were talking about how it is for the Israelites to not be vampires. We were talking about blood and how they weren't supposed to be eating blood, which seems like a strange thing to have to tell a whole bunch of people. But there were a couple of reasons for that. One is that blood equals life, and you shall not eat the blood of any creature, for the life of every creature is its blood. So there's something deeper here beyond it's gross and beyond the health risks, which are numerous. And we see as we read through Leviticus and we read through Deuteronomy that there are a lot of laws that have to do with blood. There's a lot of laws that have to do with blood. I'll tell you what, reading through Leviticus can make somebody a little bit uncomfortable. Leviticus is not it's not G-rated. It's not a G-rated book. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in Leviticus, and it's really not for the faint of heart. I think one thing that we see in Leviticus as a people who also read the New Testament, as a people who view the New Testament through the eyes of Jesus and through the eyes of the New Testament. I think we see as you read through the Gospels, especially, you see how Jesus's opponents, a lot of the religious leaders in his day and time, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the teachers of the law, how they interpreted what to do with these different laws and different things, what it meant to them to be clean or to be unclean, and what it had become by the time Jesus came around. And it's sort of hard to tell here a little bit. But by the time Jesus comes around, if you're not following these to a T, then you are on the outside of the kingdom of God. And as I read through these things, that's not what I see in Leviticus. I don't know what you see as you read through Leviticus, but there's a varying degree of laws. Some have to do with relationships with other people. Some have to do with health kind of things. Some have to do with how a sinful person can come into the presence of a holy God, which ultimately isn't something that we worry about quite as much because of Jesus, because of the sacrifice that was made on our behalf, right? So it's difficult, and I want to ask a question in a little bit, and so I want you to be thinking about it for a minute while I continue, and we'll give you a chance to give me some feedback. Adi, you asked a question a couple of times about different. I think we were talking about the Sabbath, and then we were talking about Leviticus and a lot of the laws, and whether Christians today should follow all of these. And it's a hard question to answer. Depending on who you ask, they'll probably give you a different answer to varying degrees of how much we need to try to follow these and not. But like here's a question that I want you to think about and that I want to talk about in a minute. How do you decide, if you're reading through Leviticus, how do you decide what is a rule or a law or an instruction from God that stands for all time, regardless of when you're born, who you're born to, where you're born, regardless of external factors? How do you decide what is a law like that? And how do you decide what is a law that was maybe particular to their time and their place, that maybe demonstrated the heart of God, but maybe it looks a little bit different where we are today? Does that make sense? How do you decide the difference between those things? And I want us to talk about it a little bit, because things like that are quite largely a reason why we have so many wide different beliefs in the whole of Christianity throughout the course of time, not just today, but throughout the course of time. It's because people approach questions like that differently. It's not that we're reading a different Bible. It's that we do something different with what we read. So I want you to think about that question as we get started here, and we'll come back to it. Chapter 18 in Leviticus, we've got a whole bunch of rules about relationships between people, and what's okay, what's not, really more of what's not than what is okay. There's a lot of nots. This is a lot of these that we still follow today, some that are rules in our country, laws in our country, some that are maybe not laws, but they're not even necessarily unspoken, but they're not laws, but they're things that you just don't do. And we could talk all day about the reasons for those things. But But there's a lot of laws here, a lot of things that have to do with relationships between people and what they should definitely not look like. So beginning chapter 18, verse 2, speak to the people of Israel and say to them, I am the Lord your God. You're going to see all throughout this section of scripture, I am the Lord. It's going to be the end of a lot of verses, the end of a lot of sections that talk about a particular thing. I am the Lord. And in that discussion is this idea that God is holy. Talked about how Leviticus uses the word holy more than any other book in Scripture. And this idea that God is holy, he is different, he is set apart from anyone and everyone. There is no one who is like him. And he wants his people, he wants Israel to also be set apart and to be like him in that respect. He wants them to be holy and set apart as well. So you see that right off the bat here in chapter 18. Speak to the Lord of Israel and say to them, I am the Lord your God. You shall not do as they do in the land of Egypt, where you lived, and you shall not do as they do in the land of Canaan, to which I am bringing you. You shall not walk in their statutes. You shall follow my rules and keep my statutes and walk in them. I am the Lord your God. If you want me to be your God, then this is what it's going to look like. This is what it's going to look like. I am the Lord your God. Because I am the Lord your God, this is how we're going to do life. Chapter 18, verses 3 through 4. I'm in verse 5 now. You shall therefore keep my statutes and my rules. If a person does them, he shall live by them. I am the Lord. And there's something about life. These rules and laws that we're reading have something to do with life. They have something to do with staying alive, and when not just having breath, which I think is definitely a part of them. As you're reading through them, you're like, well, yeah, duh, you're going to die if you do that. So, I mean, literally life, but also maybe life that is peaceful or more peaceful. Making good decisions doesn't necessarily mean that everything around you is going to fall into place. I think we know this. This is something we've learned probably in our lives. But it sure makes some things better if we're people who kind of live within God's framework for what a life is supposed to look like. And easier may not be the right word, but it makes it just more things fall into place than not if we live kind of in this framework for a life that God has set out, right? So it doesn't mean that they're going to be absent, or that all evil and terrible things are going to be absent from their lives, but it makes a difference, and it makes it better for a group of people to live among each other. They have a common set of values and laws. So he goes through all sorts of things here. I'm going to point out just a couple. Verse 21 in chapter 18, you shall not give any of your children to offer them to Molech, and so profane the name of your God. I don't know what you know about Molech. Molech was an idol, a false god who was worshipped in Old Testament times. And one of the most abominable ways that he was worshipped families would take their firstborn son and they would come to a place where Molech was worshipped, where there would be a statue, and there were different ones, but a lot of them, Molech was worshipped for a number of years. I mean, it's something that they're still dealing with in the time of David. As you read through 1st and 2nd Samuel and 1st and 2nd Kings, you're going to see the name of Molech mentioned. But they would bring their child, and the mouth of Molech would have some sort of mechanism, and it would open up, and like a little platform that was almost like a tongue would come out. They would place their child on this platform that would come out of the mouth of Molech, and then they would crank it back in, and the inside of the Molech statue was a furnace, and they would offer their child up to the flames of Molech. So when you see scripture continue to talk about the detestable gods of the Canaanites, the detestable gods of this group, the detestable gods of this group, this is the kind of stuff that they're talking about. The kind of religion that would ask you to give up your child in a terrible, awful, gruesome sort of way. I think that's probably something, if we were to pick out something that maybe would be the law that should stand for all time, like let's not be worshipers of Molech, okay? It's a weird place for it, isn't it? It's right smack dab in the middle, and they go right back to, probably because some of the practices that are mentioned here in this unlawful sexual relations section are things that people would do in addition to this in order to worship Molech. So we'll see this more when we get to Numbers, especially when we get to Balaam and Balak and the Israelites traveling through there. The talking donkey. You remember the talking donkey? Balaam's donkey. You'll see how what you see here in Leviticus, unlawful sexual relations or unlawful relationships or whatever you want to call it, you'll see how those are wrapped up with idol worship. They're wrapped up together. Later on, you'll read about Ashtoreth poles. Ashtoreth poles they're almost like a big totem pole that's buried in the ground, that are phallic shaped, and they were to worship the goddess Ashtoreth. And basically, one of the ways that she was worshipped is people would come from far and wide and have giant orgies in front of their Ashtoreth pole. And if enough people had sex, then in worship of Ashtoreth, then Baal and Ashtoreth would get together, and the land would be fertile and they'd have good crops. So I think that's probably why we see it here, is because there are other laws around it that also have to do with the worship of Molech. And so he probably stuck it in there because he was thinking, oh, hey, this one has to do with Molech, and this one has, so I might as well throw this one in there too. But it comes up later in Leviticus too, the same thing in a different section. It's not, is it? Yeah, that's interesting. And we'll see laws in here that talk about marriage and wives and husbands, and But yeah, not here. Isn't that interesting? This is more a lot of don'ts as opposed to do's. There are do's. There in fact, out of the 661 or 660, however many laws there are a few more don'ts than there are do's, but they're almost equal, the do's and the don'ts. So this is a section of don'ts, obviously. Verse 24, do not make yourselves unclean by any of these things, for by all these the nations I am driving out before you have become unclean. So again, they're to be different. They're to be set apart. They're to not do things like everyone else around them, which I think just add a little fuel to the question that I've got you thinking about that we're going to talk about in a minute. Here's this group of people who are going to a new land with a culture that is different than theirs, with customs that are different than theirs. And God's instruction is not to go there and try to fit in with the culture and customs that are already there. He wants them to remain set apart and to remain different. So it's not an, I don't think the answer to our question can be simply to assimilate with the culture that's around us, if that makes sense. We don't just throw all of these out the door and assimilate with the culture that's around us and have the church look exactly like everything else, which unfortunately, there's a lot of church that just looks like the rest of the world, just looks the same. And here God was calling people to be different. So it's just food for thought as you're thinking through the question there. Let's see, chapter 19, verse 1. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to all the congregation of the people of Israel and say to them, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. Does that sound familiar? That's quoted in the New Testament, is it not? Be holy as I am holy. Be holy as he is holy. You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. I think we talked about this before, but one of the purposes of God choosing Israel was that they were to show the rest of the world what it looked like to be a people of God, to be a people who were in relationship with God. And it's hard to do that if you're doing life totally against the heart of God, isn't it? In the New Testament, Paul uses the term ambassador. What's an ambassador? A representative of a ruler or of a nation. Yeah, it's a representative. So what if the president of the United States says, okay, we are not going to war at any cost. We're not. And then the ambassador from the United States goes to whatever country we're talking about and says, you do this or else we're bringing our tanks in and we're going to war. Is that a good representation of what the head of the United States desires? No. Is it an accurate representation of the whole of the United States? Well, we don't know exactly, but it's not being a very good ambassador if you have a very different heart than the person who or the nation that you are an ambassador for, right? So God says, "You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy." And I think that's part of it, is that he called Israel to be a light to the nations around them. But I think another part of it is that God cares deeply for his creation. And he He cares deeply about the hearts of people, and he cares about people's relationship with each other, and he cares about people's relationship with him. And he probably knows a little bit better than most about what a good relationship looks like, since he kind of created them. Just saying. Let's see. So we get a little bit more into stuff here. Let's see. Verse 5, when you offer a sacrifice of peace offerings to the Lord, you shall offer it so that you may be accepted. We talked about peace offerings. We saw those at the beginning of Leviticus. It shall be eaten the same day you offer it, or on the day after, and anything left over until the third day shall be burned up with fire. If it is eaten at all on the third day, it is tainted, it will not be accepted, and everyone who eats it shall bear his iniquity, because he has profaned what is holy to the Lord, and that person shall be cut off from his people. Okay, so this seems maybe a little harsh as you're reading through it. You ate some meat that was more than 3 days old, and so you're going to be cut off from your people because you ate some meat that was more than 3 days old. What's going on here? What's the purpose? What's God's heart behind this? Okay, so I think that's definitely a part of it, right? No electricity, no power. They're in the middle of a desert, and you got meat that's been sitting around for 3 days. Yeah, you better make some jerky out of that stuff, right? Yeah, this is not going to go well. People are going to get sick. People are going to get sick. The other thing here, the peace offering was meant to be a fellowship offering. And I think we can see this as we go into this next section. I don't know if so when you see like these subtitles on top of a section of text, that's not something that's in the original text. That's something that people who have translated Leviticus would have been in Hebrew. That's something that people who have translated this from Hebrew into English have put in there. They've divided it into sections to help us as we read through it a little bit. Sometimes I think things are placed in a strange place. One really good example of this. It's probably a text that we're all very familiar with or have heard. Ephesians chapter 5, beginning in verse 22. I'll just read verse 22. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. Have we read this section of text? Probably have. We've probably heard it. We've probably heard it preached on. In my Bible, at least, there is a section header right above that says wives and husbands. And so that section starts with wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. Guess what verse 21 says before that section of text is sectioned off? It says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Isn't that interesting? Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. And then it comes down into wives, submit to your husbands, and this whole section of text. It changes how you read that text, doesn't it? At least it does for me. It sounds very different. Instead of a stark, you submit to him, it's a, wait a minute, you're both supposed to be submitting to each other. And that's a very, very different way of reading that text. And for me, that's an unfortunate place to put a section header because it breaks it up. And when we read stuff, we tend to read what's underneath a section as opposed to just reading straight through a text. So this is another place where I think if there were not a section header here, it would inform our reading just a little bit. The peace offering was also called the fellowship offering. And when you would go and offer your peace offering or your fellowship offering, it was called a fellowship offering because you offered like a whole animal. And if you offer a whole animal, then you don't want to waste all of the meat. You don't want it sitting around. You don't want it to rot. So if you're going to slaughter an entire animal, then you're going to invite other people to come and eat the rest of this animal with you. And so it's called a fellowship offering, because you fellowshiped with God. There was a portion that was for him, but there was also a portion that was for other people. And so if you did a fellowship offering, you threw a party. You threw a party. And oftentimes it would be a party for people who maybe couldn't offer a whole animal on their own. And so if you are letting meat sit around and rot, when you are offering a peace or a fellowship offering, then you are completely and totally ignoring what the offering was supposed to be about. You don't care one lick about your brother and your sister and the people around you, because you're just letting food rot instead of helping somebody around you. And in a place, when you're wandering around the desert, food's not exactly a superfluous. It's kind of a commodity. And if you see what's your section heading on that next section before verse 9? What's it say? Love your neighbor as yourself. What did Jesus say was the second greatest commandment? Love your neighbor as yourself. So this sounds like an offense that is the opposite of loving your neighbor as yourself, doesn't it? Sounds like these two sections of text kind of go together. So it's I think you begin to see the heart of God there. Hey, you're supposed to be looking out for your brother. And it's important for you to fellowship with each other. This is important. The fellowship offering was about fellowship this way with God, vertically, but it was also about fellowship this way, horizontally. It was fellowship with other people too. So I think this next section gives us a little bit of a clue. And one thing that I would say is kind of like we were saying earlier, Danya, sometimes things seem totally out of place. Like, why in the world is it there? Well, once you start reading around it a little bit, and we know a little bit of the history and the background, reading around something, if I don't understand something, I try to read what's around it a little bit. And sometimes it helps me understand something just a little bit more. So here we begin to see that God has a heart for somebody who's down and out. God has a heart for the downtrodden. God has a heart for people who struggle. God has a heart for the underdog. We can say it in a lot of different ways, right? But we begin to see God's heart coming out here. So when you reap the harvest of your land, verse 9, you shall not reap your field right up to its edge. Either you shall gather the gleanings after your harvest, and you shall not strip your vineyard bare, neither shall you gather the fallen grapes of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and for the sojourner. I am the Lord your God. Isn't that interesting? If you got a field and you plant it, then you don't harvest the edges of it. You leave the edges for the poor or the sojourner. And if something falls to the ground, you don't pick it up. You leave it there for somebody else who might need it. God's got a heart for the downtrodden. And he wants his people to have a heart for the downtrodden too. If you read through the prophets, one of the greatest cries of the prophets is that stuff like this wasn't happening. Stuff like this wasn't happening. The downtrodden, the ones who were struggling, were stepped on even more, and they were cheated and they were swindled, and those who had did not look out for those who did not. And you see God's got a heart for those who are struggling a little bit, right? He's got a heart for them. Now today, what this would look like, I don't know if y'all been out to the country and seen fields, farmers, because we have all sorts of equipment today that does it for you. You just, you hop on your tractor and that does whatever special thing it's supposed to do. And what it might look like is well, because of the way tractors work, fields are more circular or oval shaped, and the corners, the edges, there's like a little, I don't even know how to do it, like a half moon shape almost with the corner, because it's circle, right? Circular fields. So maybe a farmer would go ahead and plant that area, but then not harvest it when he's going. I don't know what it would look like today, but they did this. So the story of Ruth, and Boaz. Well, how did Ruth meet Boaz? She was going through his field because she and Naomi were down and out, and Boaz did his field like this, like he was supposed to, and people could come after everything was already picked, and glean from it. And so Ruth was doing that, and that's how she and Boaz met. So even in later times, you see examples of this happening, although obviously it didn't always happen like it should have. So God's got a heart for the downtrodden. Let's see. You shall not do injustice in court, verse 15. You shall not be partial to the poor or defer to the great, but in righteousness you shall judge your neighbor. Sometimes I think it's easy to give somebody a pass because of their life situation. It's easy to do that, isn't it? I think what we see here is that there's a right and there's a wrong, and regardless of your situation in life, there's something that goes to court, regardless of where you come from. We see it both ways, don't we? Well, the movie star, or like you see it both ways, where an outcome isn't necessarily based on what someone did or did not do. The outcome is based on where they come from and how much they have. And God says it's not how it's supposed to be. You shall not hate your brother in your heart, but you shall reason frankly with your neighbor, lest you incur sin because of him. I think that's interesting. Doesn't just say leave it alone. He says reason frankly with your neighbor. Reason frankly. Rebuke your neighbor. That's what you said? Interesting. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. You shall not hate your brother in your heart. Does it have that after it too? You shall not hate your brother in your heart. Yeah. What's it say after that? But you shall rebuke. Yeah. Yeah. Don't let stuff fester. That's what that sounds like to me. But you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Y'all know Jesus was quoting the Old Testament when he said that. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's where it's from. Got a whole section about keeping God's statutes. Go down to verse 32. You shall stand up before the gray head. What's it mean to have a gray head? Jerry, what's it mean to have a gray head? Means you're aged. Respect your elders. 32. What's yours say? Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. Honor the face of an old man is what mine says. So yours is putting it a little more into our language. Mine's doing a little more literal there, but you shall stand up before the gray head and honor the face of an old man.
Mine says you shall rise before the gray-headed and honor the presence of an old man.
Yeah. All sort of centered around the same thing there, but here's what's interesting. Here, check this out. you shall do this, right? You'll honor the face of an old man, and you shall fear your God. I am the Lord. That makes that adds some weight to honoring people who are older, doesn't it? It adds some weight to it because it's combined in a sentence by the word "and you shall fear your God."
Right where it says life lessons in the Bible, it says God connects fear of the Lord with honoring the elderly, those who disrespect the aged, in fact, slander the Lord.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're meant to understand here. It's like they go hand in, and notice it doesn't say you shall stand up before the gray head and honor the face of an old man who lived a good life and has done well by everybody around him. It's not qualified. There's no qualifier there. It's simply you shall stand up before the gray head and honor the face of an old man, and you shall fear your God. Yeah. That one's hard for me because there's some people. I mean, I great respect for people who are older, who have lived more life than me. But I'll tell you what, there's some people who are older than me who have lived a life that, wow, it's hurt a lot of people. It's hurt a lot of people, and continues to do so. And that's a difficult one. That's a difficult one for me. Verse 34, you shall treat the stranger who sojourns with you as the native among you. You shall love him as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. God's got a heart for the downtrodden, for the frail, for the hurting, people who are struggling. Chapter 20, we see some instructions about Molech again. So it comes back up here in chapter 20. Punishment for child sacrifice is what my Bible calls that section there. We see some more. Chapter 20, verse 10, you start to see it talk more about wife and husband. So you see some of the same sorts of things coined in that sort of way, and it's going to start to repeat itself a little bit here, which is interesting. It's going to say some of the same things that we've already read, but just in a little bit different kind of way. You shall therefore, verse 22, chapter 20, verse 22, you shall therefore keep all my statutes, all my rules, and do them, that the land where I am bringing you to live may not vomit you out. It's quite the picture, isn't it? Makes me think of Jonah being vomited out by the whale. So that the land may not vomit you out. One thing that you'll see throughout Scripture in several places is that when humanity is ultimately evil, I mean evil, like the kind of evil that brings about books like Revelation, the kind of evil that brings about some of the prophets and some of the kind of evil where it's like all evil all the time, continually for a long period of time. You'll see that the land suffers because of humanity. When there's evil in a place, the land itself suffers. That's sort of how it's coined in Scripture a lot. Now, a lot of times when you see that, it's in a genre of literature called apocalyptic literature, which is just a genre of literature and a way of speaking about something that's terrible and awful. Revelation was written in apocalyptic style. Parts of Ezekiel were written in apocalyptic style. Parts of Zechariah were written in an apocalyptic style, but Paul even delves into apocalyptic on rare occasion. But but sometimes when there's evil in a land, you see it depicted as the land itself suffering. And so here, same thing, you see that the you follow these, or the land may vomit you out. You shall not walk in the customs of the nation that I am driving out before you, for they did all these things, and therefore I detested them. Why is God giving them all these laws? Why is he concerned about these things happening with them? So let me read this again. You shall not walk in the customs of the nation that I am driving out before you, for they did all these things, and therefore I detested them. I missed that. Verse 22, I'm sorry. You shall therefore keep all my statutes and all my rules and do them, that the land where I am bringing you to live may not vomit you out. You shall not walk in the customs of the nation that I am driving out before you, for they did all these things. All the laws that God just gave them are things that people in the land of Canaan, where they are traveling to, did. And God says, you're not going to do it like that. So he's giving them specific laws to counteract some of the ways, a lot of the ways that life was done in the land of Canaan, preparing them. But I have said to you, you shall inherit their land. I will give it to you to possess, a land flowing with milk and honey. I am the Lord your God, who has separated you from the peoples. You shall therefore separate the clean beast from the, and it goes back into clean and unclean animals. Verse 26, you shall be holy to me, for I, the Lord, am holy, and have separated you from the peoples, that you should be mine. With great blessing comes great responsibility. Yeah. And then there's a couple times entered in here, a man or a woman who is a medium or a necromancer shall surely be put to death. They shall be stoned with stones, their blood shall be upon them. Lord of the Rings is not the only thing that talks about necromancers. It's used in scripture too. And that's thrown in there a few times. And why is it thrown in there? Again, because it's something that was practiced in the land of Canaan. So let's see. So holiness and the priests have some special things that they're supposed to do in order to be clean, in order to be able to come before God, and in order to be able to be a go-between between God and people. Priests weren't holy just because they were priests. Priests went through a lot of different ceremonial type stuff in order to come before God and in order to play that role of a priest. They weren't better than anybody else. They weren't different than anybody else. But they had to do a lot more because they were the go-betweens between people and God, and between God and people. So you see some instructions for priests there. Let's see. Yeah, he gets some specific sorts of exceptions. Like if they're this, if they're that, then they can eat from this. And because Levites, they got their food and they got their support and they got their work from being priests and from the offerings that people brought, right? So so there were things that were afforded to them that other people couldn't participate in. But there's some exceptions and some things that the priests do differently. And then based on whether you're like a daughter of a priest who marries another Levite, or a daughter of a priest who marries someone from another tribe, then you do things differently. Like you're allowed to do different things. It's interesting. Some of the laws that we see. Got this whole section at the end of chapter 22 on acceptable offerings. And I mean, I'm just always, I'm reminded of Cain and Abel. Was people's heart, their hearts came through in their offerings. They did, right? Abel offered his best. Cain offered his worst. But I think also, so there's some weird stuff in here. Animals blind or disabled or mutilated or having a discharge or an itch or scabs, you shall not offer to the Lord or give them to the Lord as a food offering on the altar. So there's two different things wrapped up here, right? One is that you're supposed to give God the thing without blemish, right? Which basically just means your best. Give him your best one. But also, why do you not go and offer up an animal that's got some kind of disease? Yeah, you're going to be killing some Levites. You're going to be killing some Levites. They're going to get sick and they're going to die. And not to, like, let's say you're doing a fellowship offering too. You go and offer that. Yeah, I mean, you're going to make a whole bunch of people really, really sick. And not only that, but you come and you lay yours down. They're not walking around with bleach back in the day. Where does the next one go? Same place. This is like a communal place. This is where everybody goes to. This is where you meet people. Like this is the town center, right? And you're bringing something there that's going to make other animals. I mean, other animals make everybody sick. Like it, yeah. So there's two aspects to this. God wants our best, but also he doesn't want people getting sick because you bring something up there that you shouldn't. I think they're, a lot of this stuff is just practical stuff. Practical stuff for staying alive in the wilderness and in this situation and place where they are. Then we have a lot of different festivals, feasts or festivals. We've got Sabbath, we have the Passover, we got the Feast of First Fruits, we have the Feast of Weeks, we've got the Feast of Trumpets, we have the Day of Atonement, we've got the Feast of Booths. Got lots of different feasts and festivals. God likes festivals. God likes people to get together and to celebrate together and to remember him together. This is important. It's important to him. It's important to him that his people get together. It's important that his people get together in honor of his name. And then I love this. Let's see. We've got the Sabbath year, chapter 25. We've got the year of Jubilee. So different amounts of years here, but the year of Jubilee was every 50 years. There are things that would happen every 50 years. If you became so poor that you could not support yourself anymore, then you might have to sell yourself as like an indentured servant to someone else around you. There were stipulations as you read through this. There's stipulations like if you've got a brother who eventually is able to pay a recompense basically for you, then you can get out of it. But I mean, how's that going to happen most of the time, right? Well, every 50 years, all property is returned to the person that it started with. Even if you had to sell it to somebody because you got too poor and you needed the money. How cool is that? It's crazy. Everything is restored every 50 years. Every 50 years, it's restored to the family. And like, I mean, it's so different than how we do things. It's so different. Every 7 years, particular people who would come to you like that and like sell themselves to you as like an indentured servant, slave kind of thing, every 7 years, you had to let them go. But check this out. If you liked your master, if you liked who you sold yourself into servanthood with, then there was like this special ceremony that they would do where they would take an awl. You know what an awl is? AWL. It's just like a real sharp. If you go get your ears pierced, you get them pierced with something that's sort of like an awl. This is like an old school ear piercer, okay? But you'd go and you put your ear lobe up against the door, and they'd pierce your ear with an awl. And it was a symbol that you were giving yourself, that you wanted to stay there and you wanted to continue to serve. So even if you had to do that with somebody and you became like a servant of someone else, then there's a lot of incentive for someone to be a good, like to treat his or her, like to treat their servants well. Because otherwise you have to let them go every 7 years. It's very, very different. It's very different. Yeah, so the year of Jubilee and the Sabbath year. Sabbath comes up over and 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 over again. And all of these, Sabbath comes up. It's used so much and talked about so much. Kindness for poor brothers. If your brother becomes poor, redeeming a poor man, these all kind of fall underneath year of Jubilee, and the similar kinds of things. And we have chapter 26 is a blessings and punishment chapter, blessings for obedience, punishment for disobedience. Let's see. So let's chapter 26, verse 23. He's already been talking about ways that punishment might come about for disobedience. If by this discipline you are not turned to me, but walk contrary to me, then I also will walk contrary to you, and I myself will strike you sevenfold for your sins. I will bring a sword upon you that shall execute vengeance for the covenant. And if you gather in your cities, I will send pestilence among you, and you shall be delivered into the hand of the enemy. So there's discipline. God says there's discipline for disobedience, right? Sort of like a parent and a child. There's some discipline. Do you ever, if you've been a parent, do you ever treat, like, let's say that your child gets in trouble? Does punishment sometimes depend upon how they react to getting into trouble with you? Like, what if you say, I can't believe you did that, ... And they say, well, I don't care what you think. What kind of punishment is that going to bring about? More, right? As opposed to saying, like, if they would have said, oh, you're right, I can't believe I did that either. I'm so sorry. I won't ever let it happen again. Then
I forgive him.
Yeah, there's it's going to be different, right? Based on your child's response to the discipline that you're giving. Check out verse 40. But if they confess their iniquity and the iniquity of their fathers and their treachery that they committed against me, and also in walking contrary to me, so that I walked contrary to them and brought them into the land of their enemies, if then their uncircumcised heart, did you hear that term? Uncircumcised heart. Talks about the heart. We typically think of that as a New Testament term that Paul brought about. Stop laughing. Because Paul talked about the circumcision of hearts, right? Like it's your heart. It's not the physical thing. It's a heart thing. Here it is in the Old Testament. It's a heart thing. It's a heart thing. Okay. If then their uncircumcised heart is humbled and they make amends for their iniquity, then I will remember my covenant with Jacob, and I will remember my covenant with Isaac, and my covenant with Abraham, and I will remember the land. Same kind of thing, isn't it? There's something about a humble heart that makes God's heart tick. God likes a humble heart. And you see this in the New Testament. You see this all over the place. I have a phrase that I really like. I overuse it. I way overuse it. Probably use it every time that I speak somewhere. But I don't go to church because I'm better than everybody else. I don't go to church because I've got it all figured out and I've got it all together. I go to church because I don't have it all figured out and I don't have it all together and I have royally messed up and I have a desperate need for Jesus to fix it. I have a desperate need for him. That's why I go to church. I think we get that mixed up a lot. I think in American Christianity, we get that mixed up a lot. And we think that, oh, they're the church folk, they're the good people. They're in church because they're good. Humble hearts. Hearts that recognize that they have messed up and they need to respond to the discipline that has come their way. There's something about a humble heart that makes the heart of God tick. You see it over and over and over and over again in Scripture. Over and over and over again. We are way out of time, but we have finished Leviticus. So how about them apples? We finished Leviticus. That wasn't too bad, right? Leviticus isn't too bad. It's not too bad. I want you to think about my question, and we will start class next week talking about my question. How do you decide what from here is like a law for all time, and what was something that was particular to their time and their place and such? Because we already see examples of like some things like pork, right? They weren't allowed to eat pig or pork, but in the New Testament it says, we're good now, right? So there's something that changed. That's an example of one. How do we know? How do we figure that out? How do we decipher that? Just a food for thought, something to think about this week, and a little discussion for the beginning of class. Next week, questions about anything before we go? Yes, no, maybe so. All right, let's pray. God, we're so thankful for you today. God, draw us near to your heart. Help us to do our lives in tune with you. Thank you for making us holy through your Son, Jesus. We know that without him, we would not be able to approach you. God, we so desperately need our relationship with you. We so desperately need Jesus. And we so desperately need to be your ambassadors in this world. Help us to accurately represent you. Help us to represent you well everywhere that we go and in everything we do. In the name of Jesus, we lift up your holy name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Yeah, you too. Thanks so much. Good to see y'all.
Thanks, Brother Dennis. Good night, everyone.
Good evening.